Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's KATORS88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review. Today, we are excited to have two guests with us. Laura Federico is a psychotherapist and ASECT certified sex and relationship therapist in private practice. And Morgan Miller is a certified professional midwife, lactation consultant, activist, and birth center founder in private practice. They are co-authors of a new book called The Cycle Book, an interactive step-by-step guide to tracking hormones and knowing your body. Welcome, Morgan and Laura. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I am curious how a midwife and sex therapist teamed up. First of all, how you guys know each other. I want to know a little bit about your background, like how you guys got together, know each other, and then how this idea of the book came up and how you guys partnered up.
Yeah, Morgan and I have been friends since our 20s. We met in Brooklyn, living in some questionable apartments together and bonded pretty quickly. We have been through, honestly, it all together, relationships, the beginnings of our careers, bad service jobs, bad relationships, like all of it. And when we ended up going into the professions that we did, we remained as close as ever, but we started talking about some of the trends that we were seeing in our offices, and there was just so much overlap, and we have ended up collaborating professionally as a result of that.
That's awesome that you guys have such a history together.
That's incredible. Work with your best friends.
This book is very much needed, but I'm curious to know what inspired it, what pushed you guys to be like, we're going to do this together and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, Morgan and I came together to embark on this, I suppose, book journey because we were both experiencing our own health concerns. And then when we came together to talk about it, we said to one another, I'm seeing this over and over and over again in my office. Are you seeing it in yours? And we said yes to everything, the medical gaslighting, the feeling that people didn't have enough information about how their bodies worked, the feeling that there was no trusted place to find that information once we realized that we didn't have it. Morgan truly saved my life. And I mean that when I say that, that is not hyperbole. When she taught me how to cycle track, I was in a very, very, very dark place in my life after struggling with infertility for a few years and trying to navigate that with PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and not having any information about how infertility medications might impact a condition, which what we think something like PMDD is a sensitivity to hormonal shifts. And so many of the medications that one would take to assist with fertility are impacting hormone levels. And I got really sick. There's no information. If you Google ChatGPT, whatever it is you like to do about PMDD and fertility medications, there's nothing. There's some speculation, but there are no studies. There's no real information. We don't even have enough baseline information about premenstrual disorders in general, let alone what do you do when, for example, you have PMDD and then you hit perimenopause, right? Like all of these things that happen to a lot of people, we just don't have information about. And so I was really lost. And because there is no information, my providers didn't have any information. I didn't have any information to help guide my care. And so I felt really, really lost and really stuck and really trapped. And also felt like my body was not okay. Mentally, I was not okay. Physically, I was not okay. And I didn't really have anywhere to turn. And I finally texted Morgan and she was like, oh my God, you should have texted me earlier, bitch. Like, what are you doing? Like, we're friends. This is my job. Like, I can help you. And she did. I mean, the process of learning how to listen to my own body for the first time in my mid to late 30s was so transformative for me that I was able to understand what was going on, learn how to advocate for myself in my healthcare, learn how to communicate my needs to my providers, many of whom really wanted to help, but didn't know how to. And I ultimately ended up finding a reproductive endocrinologist who worked with what I brought to the table and allowed me to utilize a fertility intervention without hormones. And years into this, I got pregnant on the first try of someone being able to like hear my story, like listen to what I brought to the table and try something a little bit out of the box. And I was really, really obviously transformed by this experience. And when I brought this to Morgan and, you know, like really thanked her for everything she did for me, I said, how can we make this information available to more people? How can we make this information available to people before they're in a state of crisis so that they don't have to get to where I was, to where so many people walking through my therapy doors are, to where so many people walking into Morgan's incredible birth center and midwifery clinic are.
That is really cool that you were able to get into the provider that you need to get into and get the help that you need. And it's amazing that it took, you know, such a long journey to get there, but it's amazing once you get connected with the right people, how quickly things can actually move along. And, you know, good for you for persevering. So I got to be honest, when I got your book initially, I was like, oh, this is kind of intimidating. This is a nice sized book. And this is going to be a lot of information. And I was shocked at how just bite-sized it ended up being. Like, it is such an easy read. It is so just broken up in such a beautiful way. Something that surprised me about the book was how focused it was of getting into your body and like just like somatically connecting with yourself, because we're just so disconnected from ourselves. So it wasn't just, okay, well, this is, you know, the different phases of the cycle, and these are your fertility signs, and these are, you know, that's not what this book is. Obviously it has that content in it, but it has so much more in it. The pleasure chapter was fascinating to me, just talking about, you know, how do you experience pleasure? And it's like, I've never thought about that before. Like but talking about getting in tune with your body and knowing how your body works, not just with your cycle, but just with all these things, with pleasure. Just, yeah. So I appreciated it so much that it's more than just that. It's so much more than just that. I know so many of us are so disconnected from our bodies, men and women, right? I mean, that's just how we move about the world. So I'm curious to know, what are some signs for listeners? What are some signs to be looking out for that would indicate that we're disconnected from our bodies?
I mean, one of the things that I see a lot in my office, and I think really brought a lot of that intentionality that Laura and I put into this book forward for getting people back into their bodies, is, like we were saying before, people are coming into our office in this state of crisis. They're coming because there's a discomfort in their body, some sort of pain they've been exploring, or perhaps it's something to do with their fertility, where they're trying to get pregnant or not be pregnant. And so they're very, very focused on these things. In a lot of those instances, people will come into my office and say, I have been cycle tracking for months or years. I have all this data to give you. And they'll, you know, bust open their app or download information from one of their digital trackers that they use. And they'll show me spreadsheets, like, you know, years and years of spreadsheets of all of these cycles and all of this data that we go through. And one of the biggest things that comes away from those initial intakes that I do with people is that they are so outside of what their bodily experience is that the only way that they can articulate it is through like this phone app or through this spreadsheet. It's like through these numbers. And when I start to ask some of the bigger questions about, what does the pain that you're experiencing feel like? Does it feel bigger or smaller, stabbing or burning or stinging? Or once we start really getting into it, there's this total disengagement where people are like, wait, what do you mean? I've just been tracking if it's there or if it's not, or if it's something around their fertility, trying to say, this is my fertile window. This is when the app tells me my fertile window is, and I know it. But there's this disengagement from some of the bodily experiences that are also telling us what's happening in our body by these sensations. So there's sometimes this big removal of how we're feeling and being disconnected from our bodies, when we overtly are trying to understand our bodies, some of the like methodologies and easy tools that we've created in our society to do that have inherently kind of pulled us outside of it. We're looking outside of ourselves for some of the answers and how we function. And I think that's one of the biggest things that happens to me with a first sit down with clients, is taking a little back step and saying, okay, let's get in your body right now in this moment and see what it is we're trying to figure out together. I know Laura can speak so much to this with her clients as well.
Well, I'm so glad that this stood out to you all, because I personally believe that we are all missing a pretty big piece of body education, which is to be present with our bodies and notice the sensations that come up. We're wired for survival to notice when something doesn't feel wrong, but we do not know how to notice when something feels good, when something feels right, when something feels calm, when something feels pleasurable, when something feels stable. And so we're missing this whole like data set within our own bodies. And when we're also doing a lot of the tracking that is available, I mean, I'm aware that we are going to come across sounding very anti-tech, which is like only partially true. Mm-hmm. I think that tech is so helpful for so many things. And I really want us all to meet everyone where they're at. And if a wearable is the easiest way into this for you, like, great. Like, some information is better than no information when it comes to our bodies and advocating for ourselves. But there is something about looking outside of ourselves before looking internally that does disrupt that dialogue, that conversation, our own vocabulary, defining our own sensations. Like, basic example, I think it's really common to be in front of your computer and working or talking or on meetings, and you don't realize that you have to pee until it's hours later and you're literally like, oh my God, I need to run to the bathroom or else, you know? And the body has been giving many signals before that point that we are just not receiving. We are not in a state of attunement with ourselves. And I don't think we have to be in a state of attunement all of the time, but I think maybe we can have like a little bit more awareness of some of what's happening and the signals our body is sending us.
I had a follow-up question with that. So I'm obviously not a woman, and I don't know what many of these things are like, but I know as a man, I've been in somatic therapy for about 1.5 years, and I've been very, very disconnected from my body and from my emotions. And is that proprioception?
Yes, the interoception.
And I know for me, I have come to notice that I have treated my body more as like an employee or like a tool that I use versus a part of myself or something to be taken care of or something to be in harmony with. So would you say from your experience that you've noticed it, like if it has to do with infertility or something that's cycle related, that it's kind of like, hey, my body should be doing this and it's not. And this is my employee and my tool and it should be doing these things, but it's not, versus having some type of compassion or unity with your body?
Oh my God, I love how you're saying that so much. Morgan always talks about her clients coming in and saying they feel like their body is a machine that is broken, and the job that we have is to fix it by like constantly tinkering with it. And there's something about that does not help in these scenarios. I mean, it's, Morgan, I'll let you kind of like go from there with these stories that you have, but like the viewing your body as an employee, like it's so powerful to understand the separation that we have from our own bodies in the way that we like inhabit ourselves. I would love to also ask you like 1 million questions about your somatic therapy. I'm so curious to see if you are enjoying it or not. But anyways, Morgan, can you talk a little bit more about what your clients share?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be really intimidating to start investigating things about our bodies when, like we've all said and all know at this point, like we're not taught about our bodies when we're growing up. So it feels like, you know, there's some point in our lives where something has come up and it feels like this giant comeuppance of, I've got to figure it all out now. And the thing we have been taught is kind of this systematized education program. And so we apply that to our bodies in the same way. And it's really easy to do the spreadsheets and the graphs and whatever that looks like for you, and tracking in whatever that is, whether it's menstrual cycles or anything else in your body, to engage with it. That really starts to be like, you feel like an auto mechanic trying to understand an engine, and just realizing that in the body, it's so different than some of these ideas of machines that are kind of easier to comprehend at times, because everything in the body is interconnected. So we have, yes, basic systems like skeletal systems and cardiovascular systems and respiratory systems. We have these basic function systems, but none of them are in a vacuum. They're all interconnected with each other. And so the sensations that we have in our body are nuanced and complex. And it's much sometimes harder or overwhelming to start to understand that language of how our body speaks, when it's not a simplified, like mechanical or employee that feels like a controllable state to put things in. So it can be really overwhelming at first to start investigating it. But I think that when there is some grounding with it and some basic understanding, and starting to understand, how do I translate some of the ways that my body is communicating, it can start to be so easy and so simple, and not have that giant overwhelm. And you can suddenly be in your body, if that feels right to you, and feel like you're getting a clearer answer to things.
I know for you with, somatic therapy and stuff like that, it was a terrifying thought to be inside your body and to actually feel feelings and like know how you're physically feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if other people can resonate with that, just because it can be a scary thing to start really like noticing your body's cues, on top of everything else that's going on around you.
I feel like it's disorienting, like at first, at least for me, it was to start really noticing what my body feels like. Because I'm like, oh, this has been here the whole time. And I just have never noticed or never paid attention. And I'm noticing all these things, and it's almost like there's a dimension of reality that I didn't know was here, that's been here the whole time, and now I'm noticing it, and oh, this is kind of weird type experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious if you are surprised by anything that you're noticing, because I think that these are some of the questions that a lot of people have when we're saying, hey, it's okay to be present with your body a little bit more. A lot of people are worried that it's going to be surprising information that they're receiving when they're present, or that the information is somehow going to be so consequential that they're going to have to change everything about how they see themselves. Like, what has it been like for you to be more aware?
That's a wonderful question. I think a few different things. One is that I'm in somatic therapy that also does internal family systems. So there's a couple different modalities being used there, but it's interesting. And Katie and I call it the back door, because it's like when I'm more unified with my body and with myself, it's almost like therapy is working in the background subconsciously. And then I notice subtle things that I start to notice, or I'm able to regulate my emotions in a different way. And I think that what's been surprising is how organic it feels, because I haven't had things necessarily pop up and be surprising, but it's not been overwhelming at all. It's been very subtle and gradual and kind of nuanced I use the word organic because, my body is an organic thing, and it's not a machine. And so I'm not overwhelmed by feeling more emotions or noticing how things feel. I don't know that I've been surprised either, because I think there are things that have always kind of been there that my subconscious has been aware of, but it's been very gradual and organic, and it just kind of feels like almost like not a flow state, but it just feels natural and gradual, and just, like I said, not overwhelming at all.
That's so beautiful. I think that really echoes what Morgan and I hear all the time. It's just this ability to be translating some of the signals that your body is sending you in a way that feels like such a easy lift. I think the idea of this sounds really big and really scary, but the practice of it is just like you're saying, that flow state. And I think when we're talking about the way we view ourselves, the value we place on our bodies, the way we interpret when something doesn't feel correct, and the way then we advocate for ourselves, having that flow state be a part of it changes the entire sort of treatment landscape for so many people and for so many people with hormonal cycles at various stages. So I love what you're saying. And I think it's so similar to what Morgan and I hear when people begin practicing this.
I think for me too, it's felt like a journey back to like wholeness almost, of like there was a missing piece and I didn't realize that. And now I feel more complete in myself. Okay. So women often have complained, or I've seen complain about, after they've become mothers or gone through trauma, or even have like religious messaging that they grew up with and stuff, that they are so disconnected from their body. I experienced that after I had my fourth child. I had some major birth trauma, and like I was so removed from my body for so long. And so for women out there who have had these experiences or this messaging, where can someone start if they want to feel at home in their body again? Like, what would be a practical step?
In those cases, dissociation is a useful survival mechanism. And the place that we want to start there is to just begin being aware of when dissociation is present and viewing it as a choice. So the kind of survival mechanism kicking in gets us through the acute stage where we really need it. And then there comes a point where it's probably not going to just go away on its own. It's kind of going to stay unless we engage with it a little bit. And so the first step can be this like very neutral place of saying, have I been totally disconnected from my body today? Yes or no? And at that moment, you can ask yourself, do I want it to feel that way tomorrow? Yes or no? And that's the starting point. We're just like bringing some awareness to the usefulness of this function. And then we're seeing if we're ready to change it or not. And that can last, that stage, for as long as we need it to. Every day, checking in once, like, am I ready for this to change? Like, yes or no? And then we get to kind of see what we want to do with it from there. But sometimes we're not yet ready for that. And that's okay.
I love that approach. It's beautiful. Approaching it with more like curiosity and just self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. And judgment-free. You're just observing rather than judging yourself for it.
I want to shift a little bit into talking about cycles and hormones, because so much of our medical education has come from male-centered models, which I appreciate, by the way, that you guys have anatomically correct illustrations in your book. Okay, because that is something that textbooks, we've done a whole series on that before. Textbooks are missing that because it's all about basically the male pelvis. And then, maybe there's a couple female things sprinkled in there, but it's usually not anatomically correct. And it's a huge disservice. So anyways, what do you think is the most dangerous misunderstanding about women's hormonal cycles that still persist in medicine today, that are kind of stem from this male-centric way that we have approached things?
That feels like such a big question that I could have maybe 400 different answers to. But I think the most pressing piece to me is the oversimplification. So the looking at hormones as though they should be steady and simple in a way that has been very male-centered for hormonal flows and what that looks like in a lifetime. Even the way that we talk about, people who menstruate and what their hormones look like in a menstrual cycle is very programized and simplified to say that there's these averaging. Let's look at every single body that menstruates. And then let's say, all right, we've got a 28-day cycle. Let's look at every single body that menstruates. All right, they ovulate on day 14. Those averages and oversimplifications are wildly dangerous. And you're lucky if you even get that information in sex ed, but it's not very good and it's not very useful. And it doesn't really show the nuance of how hormones work in our bodies, how they change in relation to the world around us, what's happening in our bodies, what's happening around us, what's happening at work, what exercise looks like, or food. All of those things can change your hormones from a cycle to cycle basis. It can be different each time. And none of that nuance is brought into it. So there's huge misnomers on how our bodies directly function and what those hormones mean just by putting them in these oversimplified boxes. Just doesn't work.
And even showing up to a doctor's office and saying something isn't right for my cycle, and for the doctors to also be utilizing those averages. And they say, well, how long is your cycle? And, how many days are you bleeding? And what does that look like? And for you to say, well, for me, a 24-day cycle doesn't feel right. Something is off. And for a provider to say, well, we're kind of still in the average, so I think you're probably okay. There's so little room for exploration of what that could potentially mean for a person.
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference of getting a diagnosis or not for that exact example. If somebody has had 35-day cycles for most of their life and suddenly they're 24, that's a big shift, even if both of those things are theoretically normal. And because we're getting these really oversimplified looks of things, providers don't have any base knowledge to go on with that to say, oh my gosh, we should be investigating this. Let me ask you these other 20 really poignant questions. It just gets totally dismissed as normal.
It seems to me almost as if providers should be looking at how many standard deviations away from the individual's norm versus from the general norm. Because if you're, like you said, that's a big deal. If you go from 35 to 24, you're not going from 28 to 24. You're going from 35 to 24. And so they should be looking at the standard deviation from that individual's average, because that definitely shows there's like you said, there's a huge swing. And that's, I can't believe that's missed. My gosh.
All the time.
Yeah, it's just this sort of like endless, the amount of things that are missed. I imagine a lot of people listening who menstruate are like, oh, like that's the tip of the iceberg here, There's so little room to capture any of that, because to even have this ideal baseline of what your patient's standard deviation is, you would have to have an understanding of what your patient's cycles look like in general, which just like never honestly really happens. It's not a part of like how we talk in these kind of settings, and especially in terms of like general health, it's not really a part of the dialogue. It's siloed into a specialty, and then within that specialty, we're working with averages.
I feel like a lot of doctors don't trust a woman when they come in and they say, okay, my cycle was this, now it's that. Like, I don't feel like they trust women that they're able to even competently track their cycle. I was having what I thought at the time, I was much younger, abnormal cycles because I was skipping months or like calendar months. Like I was like, oh, well, I know I didn't have a cycle in July, but now, I had one in whatever the month before. And once I started tracking my cycle, I ended up realizing my cycle is like a 35-day cycle. So of course there's a month sometimes that I'm like, the calendar month is technically, skipped, but nobody like sat down with me and was like, okay, that's normal. Like, cause even at 35 days, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Right. It's supposed to be 28 days and it's 35 days. And, in every one of my pregnancies, I've tried to explain, oh, I ovulate late and that's, my dates are off. And like every one of my pregnancies, of course, I go later. I don't like go into labor until I'm like 41 weeks. And I know it and I know why, but like nobody trusts me and nobody like wants to sit down and really have that conversation. And then after I had my baby, this is probably TMI. I do like natural family planning. I track my cycle very closely because or fertility awareness method. That would be what that's my NFPs coming from a religious background. But fertility awareness method, whatever you want to say. And, I was given a really hard time about not going on hormonal birth control. then I'm like, no, I mean, I know my body, and we've successfully avoided pregnancy for, over 3 years now with our last one. And then before that, our last child before that was a planned pregnancy. And the OB just like could not believe it. Like, you're telling me every one of your kids was planned and you knew when they were, and I'm just like, well, I mean, yeah, because I pay attention to what my body's doing. And then if I'm fertile, we're using contraception to counteract that, because hormones, I also have PMDD. I'm so sensitive. They make me so sick. I've been on birth control before. I was so sick. And it's like, that's not an acceptable answer though. That's not, I mean, why do you think OBs automatically just jump to hormonal birth control for literally everything and not encouraging hormonal literacy?
I mean, okay. They're not taught it, really. That's a huge piece of it. And you're on it, that it's like, that dismissal is ingrained. It's systematized. We know it. Like, women are dismissed. Pain is dismissed. All of those things happen in the medical healthcare system. And unfortunately, it goes back really deep. It goes deeper than the education providers are getting. It's the research that we're doing that's, guiding the education we're giving providers. It's so ingrained in all of these systems that even the good providers sometimes don't realize that they're doing it. And some of these things just get so lost on it that we really do lose exactly what you're talking about, the ability to have literacy and be able to really quickly kind of individualize people's care so that their needs are met and they're getting, what they need from their providers.
Your experience is so unique in the awareness that you have of your body that it's not surprising to me that this is like blowing your OB's mind that you have this information about yourself, because these providers don't even have that information about their own bodies, let alone seeing that repeated in the patients who are walking into their offices. This is not education that people are receiving, unless it's in the, kind of like often these religious pathways of like natural family planning or something like that, where it is really useful information, but it is sort of also bringing in a lot of other emotional elements that maybe don't need to be a part of everybody's education. And so I feel like you are probably one of the only people that your doctor sees walking through your office with accurate information about their own body, it's really, truly mind-blowing that this is where we're at. When I was really trying to say, after taking the fertility medication, like, first of all, I'm like so sick, this isn't working for me, but also I'm no longer bleeding. And I promise you, I'm no longer ovulating. So when you're bringing me into the office to like, do this, IUI, like there's nothing going on here. They were like, that's just not how it works. And I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. This is what's happening, And there was this barrier in the conversation where they just weren't hearing what I was saying because it didn't follow what they thought was supposed to happen. And they said, let's just keep trying this thing. And I said, I'm not even bleeding anymore. Like, there's nothing, none of this stuff is happening anymore. The things that I know, basic sex that are required to make a baby are not there. Like, we've only got half of the scenario. There's only half of the equation here. And there was really no room for that to exist as a conversation. And it's really hard when you are being met over and over and over again with the expert telling you, I hear what you're saying, but that can't be true.
Yeah, that medical gaslighting that we are all familiar with. How do you guys think that hormonal myths have been weaponized to control women's behaviors, emotions, and things like that? And how do you think women can reclaim that narrative? Because like, I feel like the hormonal myths that I'm talking about is that like women's bodies are too complicated. I mean, that's like the reason why they didn't do research on us for so long, supposedly one of the excuses. How do you think we start pushing back on that? And how do we like reclaim that narrative? I'm guessing that cycle tracking probably has something to do with it.
I think we're doing it. I mean, this is a societal movement, and people are educating themselves because systems have let them down. And hormones aren't that complicated. They're not. There's like a pretty, simple communication pathway that's happening. There's interplay that happens in our bodies, and people are figuring it out on their own. They're able to articulate it really clearly. They're able to advocate for themselves within these broken healthcare systems. That's what I think is going to break the mythology and bring us back into a state of empowerment, is educating ourselves and sharing that knowledge and handing each other cool tools so that we can go to the systems around us and say, hey, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to support one another in doing that, right? Because this is tiring as hell. It requires a lot of energy to keep showing up in doctors' offices and stating, your truth about what's going on with your body, being met with resistance, trying to find someone else, right? To like be in it together.
It kind of reminds me of reclaiming what, like from the witch trials thing, what the systematic, attempting to eliminate midwifery and that woman to woman education. It kind of reminds me of like restoring some of that, because if you're educating yourself and you're educating others and you're listening to other women, then it's kind of reclaiming some of that education that was lost in all those years where midwifery was getting pushed out.
It's very true. I mean, I think that we've been doing this for eons and eons. Even cycle tracking is not a new methodology. It's been around forever. For before apps, before books, we've been doing these things. And so we're able to, in 2025, sit here and say, here are ways that make sense for our time, and here are ways that make sense for our communities, and to take care of one another. These are ways that we can do just that.
Why is cycle literacy more than just fertility tracking? And why is it an act of resistance in today's world?
Hormones are a part of this whole interconnected system. And so something that I think is so important in my field and in all these conversations that we're having is to recognize that the hormones that we're talking about do not only impact fertility. These impact our mental health. This impacts our sexuality. This impacts how we feel relationally. This impacts neurodivergence. This impacts managing chronic health conditions. These hormonal cycles, as they shift through various stages of our lives, impact how we exist in the world, how we take up space, how we experience so many parts of our being. And so to keep this only as information that you only get if you are thinking about having a baby or not having a baby keeps us small. It keeps this information in a place of kind of like gatekeeping, and it really keeps people away from the information that gives them power to make good informed choices for how they take care of themselves. And so to keep it in this pink little fertility window space is keeping all of the rest of us outside of our power.
If you guys, and maybe your answer will be different because you guys come from different professional backgrounds, but if you could bust one myth about cycles, hormones, sexuality, etc., that you hear repeatedly in your practices, what would it be?
I think that it is that people feel a certain way in certain phases of their cycles. I love the amount of sharing that's happening in the community right now around hashtag luteal and oh my God, ovulating hit my productivity. I love how people are sharing their experiences with that. But when I'm in the office with clients, people are often shocked because they are not having the same experiences that TikTok is telling them they're supposed to feel during certain hormonal phases. And they think that something's wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with them. Everybody experiences hormones differently. So sometimes ovulation feels awesome. Sometimes ovulation is the worst part of your cycle and feels the most disruptive. Sometimes the luteal phase is really rocks you, gets you totally, off kilter. And for other people, luteals, when things just start to line up and be really awesome. So that's the thing that drives me totally crazy is when people come in and they feel wrong. They feel like something doesn't work because their experience of these hormonal phases is different than the way that we are talking about them right now. And don't get me wrong, I love that we are sharing these experiences. I think those connections are really helping people ground into recognizing that these shifts happen in their bodies, but they're not all the same for everybody.
I have one that I see a lot, or that I hear in the world a lot as well. And it's very straightforward. It's that you're supposed to be wet all of the time. And I think people have really unrealistic expectations for what arousal and lubrication look like. And that makes them feel like there's something wrong with them and that there's something wrong with the sex that they're having. And they internalize that. And I see that all of the time.
The messaging we get is so faulty. Like, and it starts from such a young age too. Like, even just like the lack of sex education that coming out of schools. Like, why do we not know about our bodies? Why do we not know about this stuff? I will. It drives me crazy.
Well, it really does remove power, right? Like, it really does. If we don't have information, then we really have a lack of power in these scenarios. It's like very useful in so many ways to keep us in the dark.
Well, in the few times that we're getting that education, if you get some kind of, sex ed in school at some point when you're younger, the context of how our bodies work for men and for women when we learn about these things and we learn about hormones is always in the fertility lens. It's always in this reproductive lens. And so depending on the age groups it's hitting or what kind of comfortable environment it's in, people are either earmuffing themselves, being like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about it. Oh my God. Or sitting there in absolute horror of like, oh my God, I could get pregnant at any moment. I am freaking out. And that's the only context that we're learning about this stuff. And it's just factually inaccurate. And it's such a travesty that we lose all of the other cool things about our bodies that could be so empowering as kids are growing up.
If women could take away, or listeners could take away one thing from today, what would you want them to take away from all of our discussion? If you could pick one thing.
I would say, and Morgan, I'm sure you have your own thought here, but I would say as kind of like cheesy as this sounds, that, information is power here. And all you have to do is practice listening to your body to have an incredible data set. So reminding yourself that that power is available to you today. That would be my takeaway.
I'll piggyback onto that one and just say that I always like to remind people that they are the experts in themselves. Yes, you may hire other experts in other fields to help you out to understand yourself as you go about in the world, but ultimately no one is ever going to know you and the incredible individuality and nuance of your experience in the way that you do. And if it feels hard to get engaged with understanding yourself or getting to know how things are being communicated in your body and your mind, that's okay. You don't have to do it without support. There are ways to do it when you feel safe and ready to, so that you can feel able to articulate what your needs are and advocate for yourself in the world that we live in.
Where can people find more of your work or learn from you directly?
Yeah, people can follow us at The Cycle Book on Instagram. And then they can also find us at thecyclebook.com for a website where you can find out more about Laura and mine's individual practices, as well as a lot of the educational workshop offerings that we have and different events that we're doing as well.
Okay, great. I'll link both those in the show notes for listeners so that they have access to those easily. And I just want to thank you both, Laura and Morgan, for being with us today and shining a light on the things that are in the darkness, I feel like. So I appreciate that very much. And as a reminder, their book, The Cycle Book, is available now. And I'll link the book as well in the show notes so that people can easily access that as well. Because I'm telling you guys, you're going to love the book. It is so good. And I am continuing to read it. I'm not all the way through it yet, but so far it's been so great.
I'm looking at it over there.
Yes, I literally have it out right here. Here it is.
It's getting pretty bent.
It is getting pretty bent up. So it's just like, it's really great. And it's interactive, and you have sample charts in the back, and it just is really good. Very interactive and has really good self-reflection in it. I think that it is good for more than just tracking your cycle. I think it's good for being in your body and just understanding yourself as a whole person.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.